Oftentimes when we pick up a chonky book, instead of feeling like this, it feels like this. If you're intimidated by chonky books, you're not alone. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori, and today we're going to talk about my tips and tricks for handling those big, chonky, intimidating reads so that you can enjoy them just as much as I do. I would hazard to say that many, if not most readers, find really long books intimidating, and that's completely understandable. It's a huge time commitment. After all, why read one really chonky book when you can read like 3 or 4 regular normal people books? Is it really worth the time that we're gonna spend reading these epic long stories? Is it gonna be worth the page count? And honestly, even as a chonky reader myself, these are questions that I ask myself every time I look at my shelves and I ask, what am I gonna read next? Do I wanna pick up a really chonky book, or do I wanna read something that's a little bit easier? It can be really hard to find a good read these days, regardless of how long the page count is. But the time commitment that a longer book is asking of us as a reader can honestly turn many readers away from it before they even give it a chance. Now, as someone who has read all of these chonkers and more, I feel uniquely qualified to share some tips and tricks with you guys about how I find it easier to read chonky books. Now, the first question we have to answer is one that I already mentioned. Is it even worth it? Is it even worth reading these really long, drawn-out stories? And of course, my answer, as somebody who loves those long, drawn-out stories, is absolutely. But I can also completely understand how it can feel intimidating to get started. What I love so much about longer books is that they give you a unique opportunity to really settle in, to really immerse yourself in a world for a longer period of time, to really get to know these characters on a level that's completely different oftentimes from a shorter read. I love the payoffs that come from the end of a long story where I have just been eating up everything that's happening for the last 600 to 800 pages or more, and then you get those big moments of impact at the end of the story and it feels like nothing else. It is so rewarding. It stays with you for so long. And I'm not going to say that short books can't do the same, but I think there's something really special about the longevity of these chonkier books and the unique opportunity they give us in a world that is honestly moving really fast all the time, to settle in, to disengage from the fast-paced hustle and bustle of life for a little bit and really focus in on a story. I think that's more relevant now than ever before because our lives are moving at such a ridiculously fast pace. There's information and stories and doom scrolling at our fingertips constantly, and we get these tiny bits and pieces of stories and little quick hits of dopamine or interesting tidbits from the internet or from the life around us, and we don't really take as much time anymore to sit and settle with a story. As a lifelong reader and writer, this is something that really means a lot to me, and it's something that I try to share with other people as much as humanly possible. Now, I realize that you might be thinking, well, what does this have to do with long books in particular? But I think it's very relevant to bring up as part of the discussion just because we don't take the time for long-form storytelling nearly as much now as we used to, and I think that that is a really sad thing. Now, don't get me wrong, there are definitely long books that I've read that were not worth the page count or did not need to be as long as they were, but there's always an element of risk when you're picking up a new book for the first time, regardless of how long it is. Will you like it? Will you not like it? We don't know. You're gonna have to read and find out. So without further ado, let's get into the tips and tricks that I have found the most helpful in reading longer books, and I hope that these will empower you to go out and take that chonky novel off of your shelf and dig in. We're going to talk about expectations first, and then we're going to go into the specific things that I do to kind of break up my reading when it comes to chonky novels. So let's get into expectations. I think oftentimes we live in such a culture of instant gratification that it can be a big big ask to sit down with a story and just have the expectation that the payoff isn't necessarily going to happen right away. We're gonna have to sit with it. We're gonna have to let it build. We're gonna have to start the fire. There's something so incredibly special about the reward that comes with the payoffs and impact of a story that you've spent some time with. And especially if it's a series of long books, that just kind of exponentially grows if it's something that really jives with you. Long books are often playing a long game, and that's such an important thing for our brains to engage with. It's such an important thing to engage not just the reading and storytelling aspect, but also the imagination. How is it different than watching a really long TV show? Well, honestly, it's because you don't have the picture right in front of you, right? Your brain is engaged on a completely different level. Now let's get into the tips and tricks of how to make reading long books a little easier. I'm going to showcase two Chonky books that I have read and loved: Shogun by James Clavell and Memories of Ice by Stephen Erickson. This is book 3 in the series. All of them are pretty long, so it's basically the same as any of the other books in the series. One of the first things that I do with a longer book like Shogun is I open it up to see how is the book broken up on the inside. If it's not, I have tips and tricks for that too, but for example with Shogun, one of the cool things is that it is split up into 6 books within the book itself. And that makes reading it so much easier because instead of looking at it as one big chunk, you can separate out and say, I'm going to read books 1 and 2 this month, and then book 3, and then book 4, 5, and 6 in the 3rd month. And that's how I read Shogun. And that was super, super helpful. It took some of the pressure off. It made the book feel a lot smaller of a commitment than it actually was, and it was really nice to measure those accomplishments. One of the main things you'll see me talk about with all of these tips and tricks is finding ways to break up how long the book is. My mom always used to call it Swiss cheesing a problem when I was younger. Instead of looking at the entire thing, which can feel super overwhelming, you pick bits and pieces, right? It's like cleaning your room. The whole thing might be a lot when you're looking at all of the piles all over, but if you just start with cleaning off the top of your nightstand, and then you have that accomplishment of something's clean, that can really help make the whole process a lot easier. And it's the same thing with reading longer books. You'll notice that I have tabs marking where each of those sections stopped, and that gives me a visual representation of where I need to get to finish that part of the book. Similarly, Memories of Ice is also broken up into several books throughout the whole novel. And again, that's super helpful. You can put in some tabs if that's helpful. You could even do rewards or breaks in between those sections and come back to it. So that's one easy way to break up the novel into some smaller chunks. Now, if parts and books within the novel still feel a little bit overwhelming, another thing that I like to do when I'm starting a Chonky book is grab a handy-dandy post-it note and a pencil. When I start the book, I will put the post-it note in the interior first few pages of the novel, and I will actually give myself checkboxes for each 100 pages that I read in the book. This is a really easy way of kind of visualizing your progress when it's a little hard to imagine it just by looking at the page count. I also have friends who like to break it up into chapter by chapter and read a chapter a day or a chapter a week or however you want to break it up. That's another great way to get it into an even smaller section and make you feel that sense of accomplishment that you read your chapter for the day. Another thing that I absolutely love doing is annotating, and this is a whole video that I made last year that you can go and watch if you want to see my process of how I annotate. But one of the things that I find really helpful about annotating is it gives you a chance to engage with the story in a little bit deeper level. It engages your brain in a completely different way. What I like to do is I actually even have a guide at the beginning of my book that says what the different colors correspond to, whether it's a quote or a character moment or something that made me laugh, whatever you want to use as your categories. And that kind of helps me, as I'm going through the book, engage with it on a different level than I would if I was just reading it. Now, I realize that this is going to work for some people and not work for others, so if that feels overwhelming to you and just adds to the intimidation factor of a longer book, ignore that. But I do think that annotating can be a fun way to add a different level of engagement with the book. If you don't like to annotate in the book, you could always have a little journal next to you, and after you finish reading, jot down some of the thoughts that you had while you were reading, things you like, things you didn't like, things you want to keep track of for later. Another great thing that you can take advantage of is joining a read-along or a buddy read. There are so many booktubers, bookstagrammers, etc. that host read-alongs where a group of people are all reading the same book at the same time. And it can be really encouraging and fun to watch other people making that same journey with you at the same time. And that can be something that helps you kind of set deadlines for yourself or keep you motivated to keep reading. If you have a group of bookish friend or a bookish friend who's willing to read the book alongside you, that can also be a great motivator and give it that extra social aspect that can be really fun while you're reading. There are so many different opportunities within the community to connect with other readers, so I highly encourage you to check those out, to get into the Discords, get into the forums, the groups, the comments of these videos, and talk to other readers who are reading books that you might enjoy. Hi. Novia wanted to briefly say hello. And say hi. Hello. If I don't pay her any attention, she threatens to knock my camera over, so you'll have to excuse me for a moment. All right, last but not least, the other thing that I do want to say, and I know there's going to be some people that clutch their pearls, okay? So just take a deep breath with me, all right? DNFing or not finishing a book is also okay. There are so many amazing chonky books that if you are really struggling, it might not be the right time or it might not be the right book for you, and that's completely okay. I know there's a lot of completionists in my audience and you guys are troopers. Honestly, I don't know how you do it sometimes, but recognizing that it's okay to put a book down for a while, even just temporarily, and see if coming back to it later changes that experience for you at all. But if you just get to a point where you know the book isn't for you and you can't keep going, it's okay. You can put it down, you can pick up something else and engage your brain in a more positive way with a different story. So those are officially my tips, tricks, and advice for reading some chonky books. I love chonky books so much. As a fantasy reader, I read them all the time, but I completely understand, like I said before, how they can feel intimidating. I get intimidated by them on a regular basis. So if you've been feeling that way, you are absolutely not alone, and I hope that this video gave you a little bit of encouragement or some ideas to make those chonky reads a little bit less scary. I would love to know your tips and tricks for chonky book reading down in the comments below. Please leave those for us so your fellow readers can see if anything that you've done works for them. I so much appreciate you guys being here. You are the best audience ever. If you feel so inclined, please like and subscribe if you want to hang out on my corner of the internet in the future. And I hope that you're having a great week. And no matter what page count you are currently reading, I hope it's a 5-star read for you. And I will see you in the next video.